Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. All right, joining me on what is the final episode of Season 3 is Dale Taylor. Dale started as the Executive Director of Agape Asia on July 1st, 2021. He served in Asia as a missionary, learned Mandarin, Chinese, trained leaders for 9.5 years. After returning to the United States, Dale led a campus ministry at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, bringing students to Christ. Many of them were international students. Dale holds a master's in global leadership from Fuller Theological Seminary. He married Lisa Taylor in 2003, and together they have 3 children. In his spare time, Dale enjoys all things soccer, a good book club, and hiking. I don't know if this is for real or not. He's also an aspiring frontman for a Bruce Springsteen cover band.
I'm not sure what would make you think that's not real. I don't know why you're laughing right now, but yeah, it's very real, sure.
So you just told me, how old are your kids?
17, 15, and 11, all boys.
All boys. And were any of them born in Asia?
They were all born in Asia, China specifically.
That's what I thought. And so you learned to speak Mandarin there. How's your Mandarin today? Is it still?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's hai bu tuo, as they might say. I don't use it very often, but just 1 month, 2 months ago, I went back to China and ran around the country on my own. And day-to-day stuff, I'm good to go. If somebody wants to come up to me and talk like politics or something, I might be struggling these days, but it's still pretty good.
Okay, so you can like limp through a conversation.
Yeah, I can do a lot. Lisa would always say, if you can have babies in China, then you're fluent. And I was like, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, we would just go to the Chinese hospital and have babies with Chinese doctors and stuff.
So this may sound like a stupid question, but like if you go to a Chinese restaurant and you order in Mandarin, are they going to understand what you say? Is Mandarin like the main?
It's the main
language.
It's all of mainland. Hong Kong and Taiwan might do their own separate little dialect thing. Okay. So yeah, the people at restaurants they're probably going to understand. If they don't, then you should question the fact that they say they're a Chinese restaurant.
Okay.
You'd be like, why are Vietnamese people running this Chinese restaurant?
Do you ever watch that? There's a YouTube guy out there who like goes to Mandarin. He talks in Mandarin, and people are always like the native speakers are always like, oh, that's so they're very impressed by it.
Yeah.
Like, have you thought about doing that? Maybe like.
Well, that was our experience in China. Like, there's so few foreigners in China, especially we lived in, like, inner, almost nowhere land, China. So if you said anything in Chinese, everybody was, like, stopping the taxi and clapping for you. Like, no, keep driving. I just said my address, And so, yeah, they were constantly just overwhelmed. Like, wow, you love Chinese people so much that you learned a sentence. And I was like, no, we can actually say a lot more than that, but that's all you need. Say a sentence or two, and they think you're a superhero.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of I don't know if we'll have time to come back to that, but that just makes me think of like taking the effort, taking the time as far as cultures are speaking, like what that means to a person of that culture to know that you took the time to learn some of their language.
Good lessons there, yep.
Yep, there are. Okay, so I'm interested, you're talking about China. What drew you to the mission field in China specifically?
Yeah, so we were, let's see. So I'll start the story. When I was 19, although I had grown up in church, hadn't become a Christian, 19 years old, road trip, experience, realized, wow, God's real, Jesus is amazing, became a Christian, and I just knew that from day one I was going to be the kind of Christian. I was either going to be all in or not. Yeah. Like I wasn't going to muddle my way through.
No lukewarm Christianity. For
yeah,
you.
I'd seen enough of that, and that's why I wasn't a Christian. So when I decided, I was going to go for it, I was 100% in, and I just assumed, I was like, I'm going to, whether I'm, that was at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and I was got involved at the Christian Student Center. And so like whether I'm at college in Chattanooga or wherever, like I'm going to be a missionary. And so senior year of college, a guy, I guess it was, his name was Benny Mullins, but he headed up this program, China Now. He came to talk at the Christian Student Center. And I still had another semester to go, but Lisa was about to graduate. And he was saying, hey, come to China. It's basically free. You can be an English teacher, have a place to live, and you can be a missionary. And he said, you need to come for 1 year. And Lisa, after the talk said, "Oh, I'd love to go, but bummer, I actually only have 6 months free." Oh, well, I get credit for pretending like I was going to go. Yeah. And then the next day he called her on the phone and said, "Hey, I found a school that needs somebody for just 6 months, not a year. Do you want to go?" And she was like, "Oh, shoot." And she was like, "Okay, no, I think I have no good reason not to go. Maybe God's calling my bluff. I need to go." And so she went to China for 6 months. I did a Let's Start Talking thing in Peru. And then we got married when we both came back. And I was like, "We should go to Peru. I speak Spanish." And she said, "We should go to China. I don't speak Chinese." And we were like, "Okay, let's go to China for 1 year, then Peru." And we just never went back to Peru because there's infinitely more opportunities in China to be a missionary.
So how long were you guys back in the States and getting married? And then how long did that last before you both went to China?
We were married in October and we went to China in January or February, so 3 months or something.
Oh, wow.
So it was like
so you basically
honeymoon on the field.
You started your marriage in a foreign country.
Fantastic way to do it. I mean, you're by default forced to just build your own family and rhythms and figure out life together.
And when did you start learning to speak the language?
Not until the second year. So every year we honestly thought we were just going for 1 year. So the first year we just learned like survival, where's the bathroom and stuff. Yeah. But then towards the end of the year we realized, we're probably going to come back and we're big suckers. We should have learned the language. Yeah. And we'd actually already signed a contract to go to this other place and teach again our second year. And we're like, man, we should have gone to a language school or something that responsible missionaries do. Right. And it worked out really great. It was a horrible school for outreach and stuff. Everybody was too busy. It was the center of communism. No one had any interest in ever studying the Bible with us. And we were really put out. And then after a month, my dad sent me a news clip from the Times Free Press here in town about a Christian guy in Changsha, China, who was opening up a private Mandarin school. He was like, "Did you see this?" I was like, "How would I see it? I'm in China." Also, why would that newspaper article possibly exist, Yeah. And so I emailed him. I was like, "I'm in that city right now, and I want to be a missionary, or I am a missionary, and I need to learn Chinese." He was like, "Come to our school." And so what seemed like it was a horrible decision in the end, God worked to lead us to this perfect school where there were Christian adults who taught us Mandarin for a whole year.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So who learned quicker, you or Lisa?
Lisa was better at talking, maybe just because she naturally is better at it and does a little bit more of it than me.
We can't edit this out, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. No hesitancy with that answer. And my understanding was probably a little better, my listening and comprehension.
Okay.
But it was
kind of like a teamwork thing there, so.
Yeah, a lot of our conversations would be that way. She would get most of it, but I might fill in something that she didn't understand, and then when it's time to tell a long story, away she goes.
Yeah. So I halfway expected you to say, why be a missionary in China? What drew you? Where was your heart? I was kind of expecting you to say something like, Craig, have you ever had just really subpar lo mein? Because the only way to find good, was there to go. We wanted the good food. So it had nothing to do with food.
No, that is a little bit our experience. Since we've come back, we've gone to, might want to edit this out. We've gone to every Chinese place in town, and we are not satisfied. I have to go back to China to get Chinese food. Oh, well. Or New York or something, yeah.
Okay. So you make it at home? Does Lisa
Yeah, the best Chinese food, don't edit this out. The best Chinese food in Chattanooga is probably my wife's.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right. Well,
she ain't open for business though.
There's other ways around that.
Yeah.
We don't have to call it a business, but I'm glad that I know that now.
Yeah.
So, so giving part of your life to China. Oh, was it 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years exactly in China.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of time. Mm-hmm. And clearly, a literal application of Matthew 28. I mean, that's a classic example of going to the world, and so how has that application of that passage of Scripture evolved for you over the years? Let's say post China. Do you still take that as a literal? Yeah, if you're going to do that, you need to go to a foreign country and do that, or has that changed for you any?
Yeah, my first year or two in China, I was a little bit snotty about. I'm snotty about lots of things, but at that particular time, I was snotty about, people would say, "Oh, you're a missionary in China," and be like, "I'm just a Christian guy who happens to live in China." We're all missionaries no matter where we are. And, pushing back against that. And then, I'd come home in the summer and like talk at a church, and people would be like, "Oh, you're so amazing. I could never do what you do." And I'd be like, "Stop it. That's like, you just gave me a check for $200 and I'm thankful, but I'm on the verge of like insulting you because of your approach to missions. Like, no, you can do that and you should do it."
Yeah.
But really, especially when we decided to come back to the U.S., I mean, we were so at peace. Like, I think just one day I woke up and I looked at Lisa, I was like, "I think we're done in China." She said, "Yeah, no, I totally agree. We're done in China." And when we came back to the U.S., I said, "Hey, I still want to be a missionary. We just kind of decided we need to be in Chattanooga still." And so for a while that looked like campus ministry, and I was surprised at how I kept thinking I need to like adapt and like do things differently. This isn't China. Mm-hmm. But in the end, most of what we did looked really similar to what we did in China too. Yeah. And now that we're not, like frontline formally like leading a ministry right here in my hometown or anything, it's still the same kind of like rhythms. I think that's the main thing. Sometimes there may be a great opportunity to go where there's huge need, like China or someplace. Yeah. But yeah, wherever you are, bloom where you're planted, but don't be a bum.
So, I'm interested because this next segment that we want to get into, I want you to talk a little bit about where you work now, Agape Asia. So still very heavily involved in Asian type missions. And I'm wondering is that an internal, like you just have a passion for that, or are you being put in places because of your experience with Asian culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely both. Whenever you read my little intro bio, that's the first time I was like, "Oh yeah, I went to graduate school," and whatever all those things are. Like master's degrees are sometimes useful and sometimes not. But like all of those things certainly did prepare me. Like if you're looking for somebody to lead an Asian nonprofit, then someone who's lived in Asia for 10 years is definitely going to have some experience and skills that apply. But I mean, yeah, I definitely have a heart for it, because even when we came back to Chattanooga and we're doing campus ministry stuff, there would be times when we would look at like our campus ministry, and like half the people who were really going somewhere and like open and on fire, like half of them would be international students, or even like, I don't know, a third of them might be like Asian students. So yeah, my family just realized like we love that culture. We love the people. We love people who are open and sincere and things like that. And a lot of times that overlaps with Asia, but it could be other places too. But yeah, so it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you to describe what you do for who you're working for now. I don't have a lot of experience with people that I know that are missionaries or have been missionaries in the Asian culture. The one I do know was in Japan. How does that compare with China as far as trying to have Jesus as part of the conversation?
Yeah, I would say, so most of our time we were purposely in relatively small, kind of poor, rural China. Our last 2 years, we kind of knew we were maybe getting ready to come back to the U.S. or something, and we went to a little bit bigger, a little bit richer city.
Yeah.
And so those places were probably much more similar to Japan, like lots of cars, people are busy, they're working, people have some money, and a little bit of what people will fall back on when they're describing like, "Oh, it's tough in the U.S. because people are so busy." And, that stuff is true in big city China. It's true in Japan. Yeah. The biggest difference, I would say, though, is that some of our teammates in China said this during our first year. They said, you will find that there's just a like spiritual and moral vacuum in China, like by design. If you know much about history, like Communist Party on purpose was like tear down the churches, get rid of the preachers, the Buddhist temples, like all of it. It's all hokey. Get rid of all of it. And they've even in the last like 10, 20 years, the government has realized, oh no, like our people are missing something really important, like ethics and morals and things like that. And I don't know of any other country, like maybe Russia at times had that, but I think even Catholicism or Orthodox Christianity and things were there. But in China, there's almost always some level of openness or even desire. Like you will meet people who say, I believe in God, like, oh, you're a Christian? And they'll be like, what's that? Like, well, why do you believe in God? They're like, I don't know, I just know there's a God. You're like, how in this vacuum where there's no religion do you know there's a God? And like, I don't know, I've never heard about it, I've never read about it, I've never been exposed, I just know. And I don't think that's true usually in Japan.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So as far as a belief system, then you're going to run into, um, I'm not sure the word here to use. Like for China, there seems to be talking to the missionary that I talked to in Japan. It was a very hard sell, just not going to happen. I mean, they're just very geared towards atheistic type of thing. You know, you die and that's it. There may be ancestry kind of stuff, but in China, more agnostic, I guess. Like,
no, no, I would say atheist, but like atheist, but often with an awareness of, like, people would even say, but I need something. And because they would see things, you know, like there'd be stories in the news about a little kid crossing the road, gets hit by a car, and there's all this video footage, nobody stops to help the kid. And, you know, people are saying, what is going on with us? We don't even stop to help a kid who's been hit by a car. And like, everybody knows, like, everyone's so busy and selfish, and how did we get here? And so, I mean, atheist, but often with like an openness and willingness to say, like, hey, I think that's stupid that you believe that there's a God. Yeah. We know it's a superstition. And you're like, okay, what do you believe? And they're like, I don't know, nothing.
Yeah.
You're like, well, you want to talk about it? Like, I'll at least talk about it, yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's, it's interesting. I could go on with that. That's interesting. But there are other stuff I want to get to. So talk about what you do for Agape Asia.
Yeah, so Agape Asia, I'm the executive director and have been for 3.5 years or so. And so this organization has been around for about 30 years and is all about three things: changing the lives of like orphans and at-risk children in Asia. There's 60 million abandoned children in Asia, which is like a ginormous number. Yeah. So we changing the lives of these kind of children, sharing the gospel in communities that have never heard about Jesus. And those are often, not by coincidence, the same communities where lots of kids are being abandoned. Yeah. Those things go together a lot. And then the third thing is amazing people that we work with in Asia, helping them to kind of grow their own local ministries so they don't need U.S. support and they can go do what God wants them to do. Yeah. So like today, I got to talk to a new partner in India about working with him and caring for 500 more kids, and get reports about what God's doing in Nepal, and some travel, but lots of Zoom conversations back and forth, and getting training to those people who are doing it, and things like that. But yeah, it's very much like changing kids' lives and bringing Jesus to new places.
So they're like boots on the ground then, as part of the network there that you are working with, where you guys are sending people to those areas that have the needs.
Yeah. All the work we do is done by local Christians, and there's 7 countries like Bangladesh, China, India, Laos, Mongolia, Myanmar, Nepal, if that adds up to 7. But so it's all like Chinese Christians, Mongolian Christians doing the work. They had the heart to do the work. And we get to know them. We know we can trust them. And we say, hey, let's get you some training on how to share Jesus and make disciples. Let's get you more training on how to take care of these kids well. And then let's help you start up businesses so you can raise some money and lead your own ministry and stuff. But it's like 22, 23 local Christian ministries all over Asia that we support and empower to do that stuff.
So the support and the empowerment comes through, I'm assuming, financial help and maybe some like resources as far as like literature and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's all a combination of like face-to-face training stuff. So like we have a social work person on our staff who's constantly giving training and answering tough questions about kids, and obviously finances to help take care of the kids. And the same thing in discipleship. Like we work with some groups to get them ongoing training on like, how do you go out and reproduce and make more disciples? And here's some money to do that. And so in every one of those 3 areas, we actually want to give you training to do it well, and then here are some funds to do it.
Yeah. As far as like stats and tracking, are you guys seeing like inroads? I mean, is progress being made, people being, taught and brought to Christ? Or
Yeah. It's, so even when I took the job 3.5 years ago, I said, hey, I visited orphanages in China. Like I have some experience, but not much. I did a lot of inner city work here in Chattanooga, like volunteering once a week for years and years. But if you're looking for like an orphan guru, that's not me. And they said, no, like we're pretty good at the childcare part of it. We want to grow and excel at the discipleship piece. And I was like, oh, okay, that's my heart, and I can help you out there. And they said, really, we're trying to do it, and God is doing stuff. And I was pretty skeptical when I took the job. Like, I think you're just a childcare organization, which is great.
Yeah.
But no, it's like, I don't know, we're still getting numbers, but the last like total numbers that we had, it was like 15,000 people heard the gospel in a year, and there were like 2,000 plus new Christians, and like 200 new churches had started across Asia through our partners, and 2,000 kids in our like ongoing programs and stuff. So what I was really skeptical about was, I know you're taking care of kids, but the gospel part you really focus on. And I know we see that it's actually a fantastic strategy. Like, go in and to these tough communities, care for kids, and that opens up the door to share the gospel in places where like nobody else can.
Yeah. Sounds very practical, like the book of James.
It's super practical. Yeah. And like after kind of thinking about it and having all these conversations for years, I realized like there's a good stat I saw once about Jesus where it says, go through the Gospels, see all the times he interacts with people. And it's something like 80% of those interactions, he is both like tangibly helping them in some way, like feeding, healing, whatever, and teaching them about God. Yeah. There's like a couple times he just teaches and doesn't help, a couple when he just helps and doesn't teach, but 80% of the time he's doing both.
So, that brings up an interesting point, because the next question I was going to ask you related to the receptivity of those places to hear about Jesus once you've met a need that they have, right? So you've opened up that door, you've maybe established a relationship with them, and now let me tell you about Christ and how receptive they are to that versus here in America, in our American culture, doing the same exact thing. Do you notice any difference, or you think it's we can make a broad stroke with that and it's going to have the same impact no matter the culture?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every place would be a little different, but I think it's a pretty universal strategy that's like so obvious it gets overlooked. And so whenever I'm talking about Jesus actually living his life that way, I'm like, I don't think it's just him living his life that way. I think you could almost say it was like his strategy, whether or not it was, like he didn't have a strategy document, but it's like, I think on purpose, he is doing both those because he loves people, but also like it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's pretty, and like I said, even when we did campus ministry here in the U.S. and stuff, or before I ever went to Asia, the people who we see come to Jesus and really stick with it are usually people who say, that person really loved me, or I didn't have any friends, and they brought me into their community. Like, they were helped in some way.
Yeah.
And then they were open to the gospel, like not rocket science.
Yeah. So I'm glad you went that direction with this, because obviously I'm setting this up to make an observation. And, when I look at American churches today and the mass exodus of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and church leaders are scratching their heads and they're wondering what's going on and why is the church in decline. And, we're looking at other research that shows that these younger generations are very motivated and want to be part of change, want to do good, want to be a change agent in the world. And, I've talking to a Gen Zer a couple weeks ago. She was saying, we're going to go to church for a while, but if we see that, we want to be doing something outside of the walls of a church building, and we're not getting that freedom or that license to do that, we're being shut down, we're going to do it. But if we have to do it, we're going to leave the church in order to do it. And so I'm wondering if American culture, specifically American churches within American culture, is still operating on an older paradigm, an older model that is missing that relational dynamic, that like filling a need, like a true need that people have, that we're not comfortable getting out and getting our hands dirty, rolling up our sleeves. Yeah. We're just here to say, hey, you're living life without Christ, you're sinning, let me point out those sins to you and show you where you're doomed for hell. Yeah. Maybe that worked in the 50s, but I don't know that that's working so much today. And I don't know, you're raising 3 Generation Z young men. Yeah. How does that translate for you?
So I don't really think, and I don't know, maybe this is surprising, I don't really think it's a cultural thing or a generational thing or any of that. I think it's more of just because the same dynamic exists, for example, in India, where we work with some people who are like on fire, they're missional, they're leading networks of 100, young leaders, and they're training them, and they're going out to care for, like, they're doing awesome stuff. They're like, oh, you are outreach, moving out, doing God stuff. But then there will be other, like, churches that have been there for 50, 60, 70 years that are very focused on, like, teaching the truth and keeping the building okay and making sure enough people come to Sunday worship.
Yeah.
And they'll have the same dynamics. Like these missional leaders will come and say, hey, this is what we're doing over here in your backyard. Do you want to be a part? And they say, well, I just don't know. And so I think more of the difference is some people, man, I'm going to paint with broad strokes and be judgmental, but like some people really get Jesus and his heart, and they tend to be missional.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, of course I'm going to love my neighbor and help that hungry person.
Yeah.
And tell them about Jesus. Like, of course I'm going to do all those things. And other people who are raised up in church on some mental level agree with it all, but they like never get it.
Yeah.
And so I think those two camps are the ones that are kind of opposing. Some people are like, let's just keep doing our stuff. It's fine. And the missional people are like, the stuff that we need to do is feed the homeless and love the lonely and the forgotten and tell people the good news of the gospel, right? And these people are like, I don't think that's what we've been doing for decades, you know? So, because, I'm over here in this camp, and I know I'm the rabble rouser who's, like, banging my head against the wall of traditional churches. And it's not the fault of anybody. It's just different perspectives on what this is all about, I think.
It brings to light, though, I mean, because we're staring at it in the face now, where we're really beginning to see the numbers of the traditional churches that are not comfortable going outside. You know, they're going to come in, they're going to do their worship service, and they're not really missional minded in that regard. They're closing down because they're dying out. And so I can't help but to think, you know, do we need to be speaking louder, to be rousing more, to be, you know, drawing attention to this and saying, you know, we're talking to a different group of kids now who understand. They want to be workers. They want to do, and if we're shutting that down, it's not helping the church at large.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, one thing that pops in my head, and years ago I had this number memorized, but I don't know it now, but it would say the number one reason from this survey, like 10 years ago, the number one reason why it was either high school seniors, why they stopped believing in God or why they stopped going to church. I can't remember what it was, but the number one reason they self-reported was that their parents are hypocrites. And they're like, what do you mean hypocrites? And it boiled down to like they go to all the Christian stuff, but they don't do any of the Christian stuff.
Yep.
So it's like the teenagers from 10 years ago, like they knew it.
Yeah.
They're like, like it's no secret what Jesus cared about.
Yeah.
Like you made me read the Bible. Whoops, you shouldn't have made me read the Bible if you didn't want me to learn what Jesus was like, and now I know what he's like, and he's not like you.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then I also, maybe it's just my way of staying sane, but I think it's also smart or strategic. I just decided a long time ago to like move with the movers. And some people disagree. And like some of my friends who are in charge of kind of large churches, I'll say like, man, do you not bang your head against the wall all the time? They're like, no, we're slowly steering the ship in a better direction and stuff. And that's fantastic if you have the patience for it, but I just don't.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to find the people who do get it. And like, you know, I still attend a big church here in Chattanooga, and like, I'm totally fine with that. But I'm like, I'm not going to spend my time trying to get 100 or 1,000 people on board to change. But over here's like 10 people who really get it. And let's just go do awesome Jesus stuff. And hopefully other people, you know, pick that up.
To see that. No, you said the hypocritical piece. Those that listen to this show regularly, when he said that word, light bulb should have gone off in your head, because you've heard that word, and I've talked about it, and I've showed you the statistics over and over again that is still ranking in the top. I believe it's the top 5, maybe top 3 reasons why the current generations are walking away from their faith, is because they're calling us out. They notice the hypocrisy. And if we're going to preach the word, and we're going to preach Jesus, and we're going to preach love, then we have to look at what that looked like. And, you know, I hate to break it to some of the more traditional-minded churches, but it looked like service work. It looked like missional-minded work. It looked like getting out there, rolling up your sleeves, and loving on the broken people, the people that you smelled, the people that you didn't want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And you know, Jesus himself says, you know, how will the world know that you are my disciples? Through your love. And how do we show our love? Well, it's through action. It's through behavior. It's not a feeling. So it's just like the answer, I think, for a lot of the issues that churches are having with their declining growth is staring at them in the face. I've been doing this podcast now for 3 years, and we've had young person after young person after young person say the same thing.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it from somebody that's got this experience coming from Asian country. It's all across the board. It's the same thing that we're seeing over and over again.
I would say I can veer towards the judgmental, negative, pessimistic side. But on the flip side, now I realized this my first year in China when there were new Christians who 1,000% needed to be discipled because they'd never been to a church meeting or opened the Bible or seen a Christian, you know?
Yeah.
And so I realized, oh my goodness, I need to disciple this young person, and I've been reading books about discipleship, and I know it's important. But oh shoot, I've never really been intentionally discipled in a church environment. I had a fantastic dad who would build some good rhythms into me and stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, I guess I just have to make it up as I go,
right?
You know? And so I'm the kind of person, I'm a entrepreneur, pioneer, go out and get it done kind of person, but I know most people aren't. And so a lot of times when you're like, hey, average, not you, when we are saying hey, average church member, the answer is go love the homeless and do this and that. I know most people are like, it's not that I refuse. I just, I'm not, I'm not the super duper missionary. I'm not Mother Teresa. If somebody goes and does it and says, I need you to join me, I might go.
Yeah.
But so a lot of people are like, yes, someone else lead the way and model it and invite me along. That's what we do with our kids.
Yeah.
So our kids are totally comfortable with it now because since they were young, they've been going to orphanages and handing out food to homeless and stuff. But it's because we sucked it up, and at one point Lisa and I in our own lives were like, we have to get comfortable with this stuff and do it. And because even at the Christian Student Center, at least back then, we always left the doors unlocked, and there were always homeless people coming in. And I was like, what do you do when a homeless guy is in your bed? Well, I didn't plan to deal with that, but I'm going to learn how to deal with it tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the way things roll over there or
not. Insurance and stuff stepped in, and so there are things that had to change.
Okay.
But you hit, I think, the nail on the head there, where it's a level of comfort. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people, most people, especially in America here, where you grow up in an affluent society, a first world country, you're not going to be exposed to that type of stuff. And it's going to be really weird and awkward, and it's going to make you feel weird and awkward the first time you do it, and the second time, and the 10th time that you do it. But eventually, if you start doing it long enough, and it becomes part of your habit, your routine, it becomes really kind of addictive and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. You enjoy that type of showing love the way that Christ showed love. And I think we've just stepped away from that and gotten too ingrained in our patterns. You use the word rhythms. Yeah. We've got for most just affluent, well-to-do, middle class, whatever you want to label, put the label on it, people in churches, that we just live our lives, and we think that's all that we need to be doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm suggesting to all the listeners that tune into this, and anywhere else you may want to pick this up, that's not enough. It's not. It's not the abundant life that Jesus calls us to. And I know some people are going to be offended by that. They're going to say, Craig, you don't understand. I'm so busy, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to push back on that and say, no, you don't understand. Yeah. You don't understand what you've been called to. You don't understand that we're supposed to be different in this world. And I'm not saying sell everything, pack up, and go to Asia, because I think that is a specific
do it out of college. We didn't have anything to take with us, so it worked out well. But
yeah. But I think that within your own circle of influence in life, there's things that can be dramatically changed that will have this massive impact that you may not realize because you're operating maybe out of your comfort zone. So I'm saying, we need to do better at getting out of our comfort zone.
I think a big part of it too is, maybe when we were in college, this started a little bit, but certainly after we had been in China for a little bit, people were talking a whole lot about obedience-based discipleship or discovery Bible studies and different things like that. That, again, it's one of those things that seems so obvious, but people saying, hey, so if you're a follower of Jesus, that means you obey Jesus, right? Okay, well, when is the last time you intentionally obeyed something Jesus commanded you to do? And things like that are not built into the normal American church experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but we know people, when we were in China, this is the way we operated, and I know people still in Asia today, they'll have Bible studies with potential leaders, They're like, okay, today we're going to read about, these 5 verses from Jesus' life.
Yeah.
And then Discovery Bible Study says, okay, we're going to go around. How are you going to obey it? How are you going to obey it? We come back the next week. If someone in the group hasn't obeyed what they said they were going to obey, man, bummer. Reset. We're all going to do the same thing.
Yep.
Because why would we possibly go and read something else from the Bible when we haven't even obeyed the last part?
Yeah.
And but whenever I would talk to your average churchgoer anywhere in the world about that, they're like, but there's more to it than just always like obeying. And I'm like, well, I mean, there's faith and obedience and love, but no, like, don't try to make excuses for the fact that you never intentionally obey. I don't know how to get around the obedience piece of things.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious, you just mentioned DBS. Is that, because we did a discipleship Bible study kind of thing here through, it's a program that North Boulevard put in place. Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah, the same sort of thing. People have like different steps, but it's like, let's just read it. Let's explain it in our own words. Yeah. Let's tell me how you're going to obey it. And I mean, when we were in China, the most fruitful time of our ministry, that's what we used all the time. And a little bit of a perfect storm, but I mean, we would have a meeting where like one young Christian would lead a group of 4 people, and there'd be like 8 groups. And then within like a month, hey, this group's too big. Well, the group needs to split. Who's going to lead it? There's not another Christian. Mm-hmm. And we would have like non-Christians leading these Discovery Bible Study groups, because like they already knew. They're like, yeah, we read the Bible and we obey it, and then we pray. And like, yeah, are you comfortable doing that? Like, yeah, I've been doing it for the last like 2 months. And like, okay, like, but I'm not a Christian. You're almost a Christian. You're obeying and leading other people to study the Bible. And we did some of that back here in Chattanooga when I came back too. And some people like push against it. Really churchy people push against it a lot. Yeah. But people who are like new to it are like, oh yeah, sure.
Why do you think churchy people push against that?
I think we're just such a information based like group of people, like we've either been taught or it's been implied that like, read your Bible and listen to sermons and whatever, listen to podcasts, like whatever it is, read more articles. And I read 10 Max Lucado books last year. Like, well, whoop-de-doo. Yeah. You're still a jerk.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So, but the average person is like, I consume so much Christian information and media, and somehow that's the goal. I'm like, no.
And it's you're talking about just a lot of internalization, which is good to study and have that processing internally. But at some point, you got to externalize what you're taking in, because that's the whole point of discipleship is to make other disciples who make other disciples.
It's a lot of spiritual constipation.
Yeah, the old way of doing it.
Yeah. Taking in, and man, it's all getting backed up and stuck there. That ain't going anywhere.
There's a sermon. Are you spiritually constipated?
Well, it'll hit home with a whole lot of people, whether they know it or not. Because I mean, but again, really, like I've seen people who like had never even heard the name of Jesus, and within a month, they're like, I went and I gave some of my food to a homeless person. Yeah. And it was awesome, and it wasn't scary. Like, that's amazing. You've done that in a month, because this person over here is like 60 years old and they've never even talked to a homeless person. Yeah, and like that's not the gauge of faith or anything, but it's like they're intentionally growing as opposed to just here I am still.
And I don't think, because people get kind of shifty whenever I talk about stuff that puts them, I guess maybe on the defensive. Mm-hmm. But this is what you're saying here is I think something that we need to think about more. So we're not spiritually constipated. When I ask people, the churchy people, and I'm very careful who I ask this to, because it could be triggering. How many people have you brought to Christ in the past 6 months? How many people have you brought to Christ or had a Bible study with in the past year, the past 5 years? Mm-hmm. And, what we see, and again, the numbers are declining, so there's a lot of variables there, but this is one huge variable, is if we're not studying with people, if we don't have people that we are searching out, trying to disciple and to convert and to have these conversations with, then how is the church growing? Yeah. And so I think, not to focus on numbers, but I think that's a good self-check for all Christians to just think about, say, how many people, new people, have I met that are not Christians in the last year that I've been intentional about building a relationship with, and doing life with for a little bit so we can establish some level of trust where then I can sit down and say, what happens when you die? You know, and begin that opening conversation, which hopefully leads to a Bible study, which hopefully leads to bringing a person to Christ. And maybe I'm, Dale, way off base here, but I think for the majority of people who call themselves Christians, who go to church on a regular basis, it's going to be a very few, small percentage of people that say, yeah, I typically bring one or two people to Christ every year.
Yeah, I agree. But again, to make excuses on the behalf of those people who I don't agree with, though, I think a lot of it's about your community, and it's about the rhythms and habits that you kind of take in from other people.
Yeah.
And so I'm aware of the fact that it's so easy to, so if a preacher stands up and says, everybody, we got to do this, I think it's almost counterproductive,
Yeah.
I think it's that is a good message if it's accompanied by, and now let me tell you exactly how we're going to try to do that over the next 3 months.
Right.
And we're legitimately going to sit down in the same room and do some of that together. Then that's helpful and exciting. Otherwise, it's just another guilt trip that they're I can either listen and be guilty, or I can tune them out. I think I'll tune them out, you know.
And I'm glad for our leadership here at Central, because they kind of put the action to that piece, because I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the fact that we need to be discipling more. If you listen to any of the podcasts, you see this theme recurring over and over again. But the pushback that I received was, okay, fine, we can do this, but we need to make sure that we're doing this within the biblical narrative of equipping the saints, Ephesians 4, right? And so then that became the overriding theme, if you will, and we were making sure that we were doing the DBS here with all the members. So we had different classes and stuff, and trying to give them the tools and the equipment, and actually having them work through what that would actually look like. So now it's just a matter, you've got the tools, you've got the equipment that you need. Now all it is just a matter of finding those people. And that's kind of where we're at now. And I think, it's a step in the right direction. But how do we motivate the people once they've got that skill set now to actually, implement it?
I think it's that move with the movers thing. Again, I'll, the discipleship guy from Clear Creek, if he ever listens to this, I always give him a hard time, because his job or his way of approaching things is what can we do for this big church at once to do it? And I'm stop it. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
There must be 3 or 4 people who get it, though.
Yeah.
And start with those 3 or 4 people who are yeah, I actually want to do it. And then you've got a culture, and people are looking at it and they're saying, oh shoot, that thing that Craig keeps talking about, the 4 of them are actually doing it. And then after 6 months, they're and it turns out I think they like it, and it kind of works, and it kind of doesn't work, but it's better than what we're doing. And then you've got a few more people, and I think that's how culture actually grows, and the things that people are used to and that they expect to change over time. And that's one of the things I loved about always working with college students is every year you can just pretend, you can start over and pretend it's what you've always done, right?
Yeah.
Here at the Christian Student Center, we use Discovery Bible Study, and we always have, right? Oh yeah, sure. And the freshmen will be okay, that's what they do, I guess, And in the real world, though, it's not quite that easy. You have to slowly build the culture.
Right.
The example that pops out in my head, and it's a little bit relevant, but in Agape Asia World, one of the things that I was pushing is, hey, all these ministries we work with in Asia, you have to work towards supporting yourselves.
Right.
And almost nobody wants to support themselves if you can get support from somewhere else. And if you know about missions or anything, churches in the U.S. send money to folks overseas for 100 years and nothing changes. I was we're not going to do that. You have to change. And almost everybody would be that's a neat idea. Okay. But then when you're no, now starting next year, you have to change. Everybody's no. But we would find one partner and spend a whole lot of time and actually get that person doing something. And after a year, people are oh, that kind of worked. That's neat. But then we get 2 and 3. And now we're at this point where all of our partners in Asia look at it, and there's these 5 amazing success stories. And now they're saying oh, so that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I actually want to be a part of it. But when it's just an idea on paper, or when it's something the boss is telling them, this is what we should do, everybody's sure, Dale.
Yeah.
That'll never work, but we're going to nod our heads.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. So I think the lesson there, if I'm understanding you correctly, is if you have a heart for that, and you can probably find 3, 4, 5 other people, just go do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest red flag in that scenario would be if you have church leadership that try to shut that down. Then that's kind of, do I want to be a part of a church that doesn't promote talking to people about Jesus?
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's room for vision and some strategy in there, right? Like, hey, year 1, yes, our plan is to just have 4 people.
Yeah.
Hopefully year 2, year 3, like this isn't going to be some weird, the rebels are out
Right.
there in Red Bank doing their own
Right.
thing. Like, no, it's going to eventually get a big part of the church involved, but not overnight.
Right. Kind of a grassroots type movement.
Yeah. Jesus had 3.
Yeah.
And then 12 and then 70. And
this has been a good conversation. If you're listening and you want more information on Agape Asia, what's the website that they can go to look and research?
AgapeAsia.org.
AgapeAsia.org.
Yep.
We'll also put the link in the description of this. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go to the link there. I'm assuming any nonprofit organization is always looking for donations, so that would be
I mean, obviously, but in particular, the sorts of things that we really encourage and love for people to get involved in are like, hey, you can help an individual kid, or like maybe there's a community like, oh wow, I could help this one village in Nepal learn about Jesus for the first time and help the kids there. I mean, totally change their lives. And like, so be praying for them, give a little money, and like an entire community on the other side of the world could be different because of your generosity.
Is agapeasia.org the best place to go and get that information?
Yeah. Like there's always right on our front page, it'll say, here's the most pressing need. And so right now it is a place in Nepal. And it's like there's a few hundred people. Most of them don't know Jesus. There's 12 kids desperately need help. You want to help us out a little bit in that one community? Yes or no? Click the button.
Great. Yeah. Folks, consider taking a look at that. This is now the second conversation that I've had with Dale about that work. I think it's something that's needed, worth looking at. If you've got extra money and you're looking to put it to good work, Agape Asia is definitely one of the better ones out there. Give us feedback, share, subscribe if you like what you're hearing. I love the feedback because it kind of gives me an idea of what direction to go into. Speaking of going in different directions, so this is the last episode of Season 3. We're going to be taking a brief hiatus through the month of January. We've got some studio work that we need to do to improve. So in the meantime, if you've got different topics or things that you would like us to jump into, go ahead and do that. We've already got some folks that we're getting lined up as far as guests for Season 4. I think you're going to be pretty excited to hear some of those names when we drop them. Sponsorship. Ministry League, I always like to plug them. They are one of our sponsors. You can see the app there on your screen. Download that app. It's going to give you a lot of different resources that you can use on a daily basis. Talk about discipleship and talking to other people about Jesus. There's a lot of resources there for preachers or people just looking for material to talk about. I like to close out the show with the guest reading a passage of Scripture. Dale, do you got something picked out there?
Yeah, sure. So Matthew 22, the greatest commandment. Not the greatest commandments. That's what I always say. But in Matthew chapter 22, it says, "But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. 'Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?' And he said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets.'"
Great. Until our next podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War, love one another, be kind to one another, and remember that the Creator of the universe loved you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Have a blessed day.